If I was to inexplicably give you a cheque for £50,000 and ask you to go and buy me a sort of medium-sized family crossover slash SUV from a premium or prestige manufacturer, I can pretty much guarantee that 95% of you will return with either a BMW, a Mercedes-Benz or an Audi. The other 5% of you might have thought a little bit out of the box and come back with either a Lexus or a Volvo. Yet none of you, I can guarantee, will have thought about buying something French. Now, what's particularly curious about that is the fact that in the top 5 luxury brands in the world today, 3 of them are actually French, yet none of them are automobile manufacturers. And what makes it even more curious is if you think back through France's history of car makers, they had some of the world's most prestigious and some of the most exclusive brands in the world. Delahaye, Delage, Bugatti, Voisin, Facel, Vega. And they're all gone now, save obviously for Bugatti, which is obviously part of the dark side that is known as the Volkswagen Group. Yet Stellantis, the brand formerly known as PSA, want to re-inject some of that French savoir faire back into the automotive sector and claim some of it for their own. And they're doing it with this. Welcome to this week's new car review. Welcome to the DS7 E-Tense 225. And please sit down, make yourself comfortable in the house of cars. Now, before I get started on the review, because House of Cars is quite a new channel, if I could ask you, if you don't mind, could you make sure you subscribe to it? Because that would really help us. And once you've done that, if you press the bell button down below, you'll get a notification of when the next video is uploaded and it goes live. Now, it's not just going to be car reviews we do here. There's going to be new cars, there's going to be old cars, there's going to even be road trips, and there's a lot planned over the next couple of months. So please, I really do rely on your support. So if you could do that, I'd be really grateful. If you enjoy it at the end, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and of course, don't forget, leave me some of your comments down below. Let me know what you think about what I'm doing on the channel, and of course, if you have any suggestions or cars that you'd like to see on it, let me know. Right, bit of a history lesson first, so bear with me on this, like being back at school. DS automobiles, who are they? Well, effectively, DS came from Citroën. Of course, DS, it means goddess, DS, in French, and it was originally one of a Citroën model way back in the 1950s, one of the most successful and probably one of the most recognisable models. But Citroën saw sort of like, you know, the success that BMW are having with the reinvented Mini, sort of like about 10-12 years ago, and decided that they wanted a little bit of that action, but they knew they couldn't do it with the humble C3, so they brought out the DS3, which was a sort of more kind of stylish kind of version of that car. It injected a little bit of sort of je ne sais quoi into the car, and it was very successful. And there was more cars followed, the DS4, the DS5, which is a really quirky car. But the thing was, maybe bar the DS5, they were literally just rebadged Citroëns, and they knew that sort of like to really sort of like elevate the brand up a little bit, they needed to move away from that. So in 2014, it became a standalone brand. In other words, it's not a rebadged Citroën. There was no sort of like Citroën badges on the cars at that point. They were known just as DS's. And then in 2018, they launched the DS7 Crossback, this medium-sized kind of SUV slash crossover, whatever you want to call it. And that was the first model that was a proper standalone car. In other words, it wasn't based on any other Citroën model. This was DS's own car. In 2022, it's had a bit of a facelift, and it dropped the Crossback title, so now it's just simply known as the DS7, and it had a few changes in terms of its running gear and such like. And it was a car that's always really intrigued me. I've always liked the look of the car, so I thought, let's get one in, let's have a little look at it and see what it's all about. And this is the new sort of like 225. There's a hybridised range now, so there's only one diesel mod. We'll get onto this, but basically there's basically one diesel mod now, which was a real kind of staple, if you like, of the French brand. Diesels have always featured sort of like through like France's, you know, Citroën and Peugeot's history, but they're kind of moving away from that, but moving towards electrification. But this is not an electric car, it is a plug-in hybrid. So what's it like? What's it like to live with? Well, in this week's review, I plan to tell you all about it. But before I start with the road test, let's take a quick look at the main points of the DS7. Well, the DS7 is the French brand's flagship car, and it is the choice of transport of the French president himself. As I say, it's a D-segment SUV in terms of size, competing with cars such as the Audi Q5, BMW X3 and Mercedes-Benz GLC models. It has a choice of 1 diesel engine and 3 petrol plug-in hybrid models, 2 of which offer 4-wheel drive depending on trim level. There are 3 trim levels to choose from, and prices range from just under £39,000 to just over £59,000, depending on that drivetrain and trim level you do choose before any options. So what we have here is a French mid-sized SUV with a leaning towards luxury and hybridised drivetrains. Would you choose this over an Audi Q3 or Q5 TDI? And if you did, would that label you as cool, quirky or cuckoo? Let's stick it through the House of Cars road test review and find out. Now this is quite interesting because we're going to start with styling. Now my partner's been driving this car as well this week, and we'll get on to what she thinks of the car a little bit later. But interestingly enough, she was talking about the styling of it, and this is where we really disagree, because she said, oh, it's a bit, it could really be anything, you could stick any badge on it. I don't think you could. I think the styling of the car really stands apart in the marketplace, and let's be honest, that is pretty much the marketplace these days. You know, you pull up outside any school gates now and there's BMW X1s, X3s, Audi Q5s, Mercedes-Benz, all the rest of it. And I think this really does stand apart. Now, as I say, it was originally launched as the DS7 Crossback, but now it's just DS7, and it's had a bit of a facelift. So what have they changed? Right, well, they have changed a little bit. The original car had some really fancy lights that used to kind of swivel around when you started it and used to sort of come to life. They've gone now, but they've now got these digital LED matrix lights which are designed not to dazzle kind of oncoming drivers. So obviously they can't have the kind of the fancy motors that make them swivel around now. So they've lost that for the benefit of a little bit of safety. Fair enough. This bit I really do like, however. This down here, these kind of lines down here. And we see some of these on their other models, such as the DS3, the small kind of crossover, sorry, there's a helicopter going above, and the DS4 hatchback and the DS9 saloon, which is a lovely car to drive. Basically, a daytime running light is this outward one here, and then these other ones here aren't lit up. They're just clear polycarbonate, sort of like lenses almost, where the light from that one shines through. And it gives it a really nice kind of frontal aspect to the car. They redesigned the grille as well, so the grille is a little bit wider now. And if you go, depending on the trim model you go for, if it's chrome that you get on other bits of it, then these bits are chrome in here. But you can have a trim called the Performance Line Plus, where these are blacked out. But I say, we'll talk about trims a little bit later on. You get your big bold DS badge logo right in the middle of the grille, and I do like that. Plus then you get a kind of secondary little kind of ingot style badge that the cars used to have, which is kind of this centre kind of almost spine that you just see just coming out of the bonnet and then disappearing again, and that's framed by that there. That's lovely, I like that. You get a little bit of cooling obviously down the bottom, at the bottom of the grille there, and then obviously there's a square bit there for your radar sensor. But as I say, I think it's a very distinctive looking car, and I think it's different enough to what is going there. And I can't picture it with, you know, the 4 Audi rings on it or a BMW badge on it. But as I say, Liz seemed to think that it didn't look all that special from the outside. What do you think? Do you agree with me or do you agree with Liz? If you don't agree with her, I promise I won't tell her. It's probably the side profile where the car is its least distinctive, and maybe that's what Liz was talking about, because, you know, from this angle, it could probably be, you know, an Audi, a Q5 Audi or something, you know, like that. There's nothing really sort of, you know, particularly French about it from the side view. But there's nothing wrong with that, don't get me wrong. Wheel sizes, well, they start from 19-inch and they move up to the 20-inch model, 20-inch rims, which this particular car has. The top of the range model has 21s. Now, that's not a particularly great idea, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. So the 20s, I think, that are on this car are about right, in fairness. This particular car is in a dark metallic blue called sapphire blue, so it does kind of hide little bits of it, so that you get the kind of ubiquitous kind of black plastic wheel arch, not extensions, but, you know, guards around the side and then down at the bottom. What I do like, however, is this. When you open the door opens up over the sill. So, you know, that sill section there, so as you get in and out of the car with light coloured trousers, if you've been through sort of like mud or whatever, you know, you're not going to get your trousers or your skirt or whatever are dirty on the side sills because, as I say, the door covers it. So I do like that. That's a really neat little design trick that some manufacturers do, and I applaud them for doing it. Satin kind of chrome roof rails on the car. Now again, depending on the trim level, they may be black if you go for the performance line car, and if they're black it means you get black around other bits, so the grille, the door trim here and the top of the door handles. But I quite like the chrome. I'm not a big chrome lover these days, you know, it was for classic cars, and I think, you know, a lot of people add chrome thinking, oh, that makes it look luxurious. It doesn't really. But on saying that, on a dark car like this, I quite like it because it just gives it a bit of a lift. So I do, and it's not much in fairness, so I do quite like that, so that's fair enough. Privacy glass on the back windows, which I do like, especially if you've got small children. I like having privacy glass if I've got my daughter in the car, and that's fine. And then obviously you come into this kind of shallow kind of roof spoiler here. Now there's two fuel filler caps, for want of a better word, one on this side, one on that side. One's obviously for putting petrol in it, the other is for charging up from your home wall box, but I will talk about charging the battery because this is a plug-in hybrid, but I'll talk about that when we get to the technical sort of like section of it. But yeah, probably from the side it's its least successful angle, but it's not a bad looking car. Now, round the back, a bit like the front, you start to see a bit more kind of distinction of the DS Automobiles kind of brand. Now, the old car used to say Crossback across here, whereas now it has DS Automobiles in the lettering there. It's small. I don't know why manufacturers just start to spell out their names right across the back of the cars. But in fairness, that's small enough that it doesn't bother me that much. And I quite like that. That's okay. I don't have an issue with that. And then, of course, you get your big DS logo there, which I do like. I do like the big stylized logo. The rear lights are that kind of clear, you know, kind of thing that was going on. People that obviously Lexus used to do. But they've got the kind of little diamond shapes. Now, diamonds are a girl's best friend, forever, whatever you want to say. But they're kind of DS's theme, if you like. And you see it more in the little kind of DS3 that they've got, the new one that used to be the Crossback, rather than some of their other cars. But there's still a lot of it going on in the inside of the car as well. And I do quite like that. It's a bit over stylized for some eyes, but I think it's different and I think it stands apart from the competition. So there we go. High level brake light mounted up in there, obviously. Rear wiper. Oh, I do love a rear wiper. And I like this line here that kind of follows on just round the side there and just kind of gives a bit of a kind of bit of depth to that kind of area there, just below that rear window. It's quite a shallow rear window in some respects though. That's the only thing I will say. But it's okay. It's all right. E-tents there. Now E-tents is kind of DS's sort of like way of sort of like saying it's electrified. It's not electric, it's electrified. And the reason that you don't get a full electric version of the DS7 is because of the platform it sits in. It can't take a fully electric drivetrain on this particular platform. I would think obviously as the car is replaced in years to come, then that's obviously what it will do, because DS are moving towards full electrification, and they have done with the DS3, which is a really good little car. Now if you want to see a review of the electric DS3, then what you need to be doing is watching Auto EV, because that's my other channel where I cover just fully electric cars. So if you want to head over to Auto EV after this one and read a review of that, you'll find that one there. What else? DS7 badge over there, number plate there. Now you've got these lights down here which are obviously sort of like, you know, different because they're red in terms of that there, which is a little bit of a mismatch, but there's a reason for that. And if I can make this work, because it has one of those kick, there you go. When the boot lid goes up, the lights go up. So you need legally to have lights down there. They don't have secondary lights there, they're just in there. So that's why they are there. Chrome trim round, there's a smaller exhaust inside there, which I don't have a problem with. It just makes it look a little bit nicer to integrate into that rear bumper. And then you've got this diffuser area here with your reversing sensors in it as well. And there is, he says, a little camera just above the number plate there. So you've got a reversing camera as well on the car. Now, what do we think? Well, as I say, I really like the look of the car. I think it's quite distinctive. I think it looks different to the Audis, the BMW and the Mercedes. And I drive a BMW as a daily car. And I think there's something about the car that I really like. They've just kind of hit the real kind of nice kind of middle ground. And I think there's a lot of detail on the car that's going to make it very, very different. And I think it's worthy of a look. But more of that on the inside than there is maybe on the outside. But from the outside, styling-wise, I like it. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Have you got a DS7 Crossback? Did you choose it because of the way that it looked? Or did you just choose it because of the inside, or because of the fact it wasn't a BMW, Audi or Mercedes? Let me know in the comment section down below. Right, is it practical? Yes, it is. The boot opens up to 555 litres of boot space, which is good, which is very, very good in fairness. You've got a 60-40 split rear seat, which you can fold down by these handles here. You just pull those and they flip down. Now that takes then the total capacity up to 1,752. However, there's a bit of an issue here, and I'm not quite sure why they've done this. A couple of things. So as I say, it's a good sized boot. There's nothing wrong with that. However, when you flip those rear seats down, you'll notice that the floor isn't level now. And that's because in the old DS7 crossback, there used to be a false floor. It's still got sort of like the points for it there, where you can lay it in. And they've done away with that, and I don't know why. Because actually, I quite like that false floor. Because the reason is twofold. First of all, as I say, when you fold the rear seats down, there's now a distinctive lip between sort of like the boot here and then obviously the seats, which is odd for loading stuff in as well. However, it also means that there isn't an underfloor storage area for your charging cable. So if they put the false floor in, that would just fit neatly underneath there, and then you could put stuff on the top of that. But they've done away with it. I don't know why. It seems such a backward move, that. However, in terms of space, let me show you. So there's a large suitcase, there's a medium suitcase, there's one carry-on because my sister-in-law's got her other, but you'd get another one down there, so you get 4 suitcases across there. Plus, if you look, there's my camera bag, that would go in there or there. You get jackets on as well. Plus, in fairness, you do have room to put that cable in there as well. The other thing as well is your load cover is actually a hard cover rather than sort of like a retractable blind. So it feels a bit more secure, and then obviously what you can do is when that's down you can maybe put jackets and stuff on top of that, and it's a bit more rigid for holding things. But it does mean that obviously if you're taking that out because you want to have all the space, you've got to find somewhere to store that rather than just a roller blind. So there's pluses and minuses for this sort of like setup of boot. But I am very intrigued as to why they've got rid of that false floor, because to me it would just give it a little bit more practicality in terms of sort of like hiding stuff under when you're not carrying kind of big bulky items like suitcases. But otherwise, it's all right. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice there is a small error in continuity in this section of the review, and that is purely because when I started editing the film, I realised the section that I'd recorded in the back seat, the file was corrupted and it cut off some of it, so I've had to do it again. Thankfully I noticed it before the car's gone back, but that's the reason why I'm dressed differently and the car's in a different location, so forgive me for that. But this is important because I need to show you what the rear seat accommodation is like, because it is a family car. So, what is it like? Well, let's have a look. It's really good, actually. That seat is slightly further back because what happens when you turn the car off, the driver's seat slides backwards, and then when you put it on, when you switch the car on again, it moves back to my position. So that isn't actually my position. I would suggest that is the driving position of somebody probably around about the 6 foot mark. I'm 5'8", and it goes quite a bit further forward than that for my driving position. So if you think about that being a 6-footer's driving position, that's all right. As I say, I'm 5'8", and I've got plenty of sort of like knee room here. Foot room's a tiny little bit tight. That's the only thing I will say, and I do feel my legs are pushed up a little bit. What I will say, however, is there is a completely flat floor, which is odd considering it's not a bespoke EV. You know, most of the time you find a car with a combustion engine will have some form of centre tunnel across there, so that's really good. Now, I don't think you're going to get 3 adults across the back of the car, and the reason for that is the car kind of curves in at the top here. It's sort of like quite narrow as it sort of get to its height, and whilst I have plenty of headroom, I would think that 6-foot passenger, it might find that roof encroaching on them a little bit. And as I say, in terms of 3 across, I think shoulder room might be at a premium if it was 3 adults you had, but certainly 3 children wouldn't be a problem. Talking to children, you've got ISOFIX points, obviously, as you'd expect. 2 on the outer seat, sorry, 1 in either outer seat here. They're not, thankfully, like normal Stellantis group cars, those fiddly little zips. They're actually exposed, but they are between sort of like the backrest and the squab. So you've just got to poke your seat kind of through there till you find them. But you should be able to find them quite relatively easily enough. And I'd also suggest there's probably enough space for you to actually get one of those kind of big bulky, you know, seats that kind of swivel, to rear facing to front facing in here, because there seems to be quite a gap between there and there, so that's quite good. You've got rear climate controls in the car as well, so it's a 3-zone climate control that you get in the car. Front 2 passengers obviously there, sorry, driver and front passenger there, and then rear passengers are controlled from here. And there's also 2 USB connectivity ports at the back here, which I have to say is very, very good, considering also that the £100,000 Audi SQ8 e-tron I'm driving at the moment doesn't have them in the back. So it does have them. Door bins are good in terms of storage. You would get a water bottle in there. They're not particularly long, but they're relatively deep. But again, like the front, they're lined with carpet, which is perfect, so it stops things kind of rattling round. Centre armrest for a bit more comfort. It's got 2 cup holders here, but what I will say is they're quite small and they do appear to be quite shallow. That's the only thing. And there isn't sort of like a load through facility. You know, obviously it's a 60-40 split, but there isn't like a ski hatch through for carrying longer loads. So yeah, that's maybe a wee bit of the downside. And the only other fault I can really say is these mat pockets on the backs of the front seats. They're kind of, you know, the net style, and they just look really shallow. I don't think they would hold much in there in terms of, my daughter's always taking a book with her now when we go on a longer road trip, or you know, on an iPad and stuff's in her bag usually, but she'll put a book down there, and I don't think that would hold one of her books, in fairness. I mentioned headroom. As I say, it's fine for me, and obviously for, you know, sort of like smaller passengers, taller passengers, they might find that encroaching in, but you do get a lot of light inside the cabin with this panoramic sunroof, and that's probably a lot of the reason why, you know, sort of like the headroom is starting to get a little bit tight in the back as well. But the seats are nicely reclined in the back, and you do feel like you're really sitting in the car. You don't feel like sitting on top of a bench, which is quite nice. So I do feel like, you know, you could probably do quite a nice long journey in the back of this car. Last thing to say about is, again, the quality of it. You know, things like just the rear grab handles, they're beautifully damped. The little lights that are above you, you know, in the ceiling here, you know, again, there's the kind of touch sensitive kind of courtesy map reading lights. They're really nice. And you do also have, you are able to recline the back seats as well. On this Opera model, there's a switch in the door pack here, so it allows you to recline the rear seats on this particular model. So that's lovely, being able to do that. No heated rear seats, however. That's you know, a little bit of an omission that some rivals do fit. So otherwise, I can't really complain about the back at all. As I say, there's certainly enough accommodation for 3 children. You're going to get 2 medium-sized adults in here in relative comfort. Taller adults might start to find it a little bit tight, but I don't think they'll be they won't complaining too much, and you get good connectivity and reasonable storage. But the one thing to say about is the comfort again. You know, the softness of these seats, the leather on these seats, it's just beautifully soft. And as I say, in terms of doing a long distance in the car, I wouldn't have a problem with this at all. So, as I said, when I was outside and discussing the styling, it was the one area where Liz and I were not quite seeing eye to eye on the styling of it. She didn't think it looked all that special, didn't look distinctive enough. I did, but the one thing we do agree on is how wonderful this interior is. She stepped in the car the other day and she went, my God, this is a luxury car interior. She adores the interior of this car. She said it feels really special. And I have to agree with her. I really do have to agree with her. It isn't perfect, and I will tell you the bits that we don't like, or certainly I don't like. And I'll kind of run you through the different trim options that are available to you. But basically there are 3. There's the Performance Line Plus. I don't want to say it's the base trim because it's not basic. So that's your lead into the range, if you like. Then there's the Rivoli. And then this, the Opera. There used to be others within the range, but I think they've simplified a little bit now. There used to be things called I think it's Esprit de Voyage and La Première Edition and things. That's all kind of gone, I think. So just check if you're looking at a used one in terms of the trim levels, what it would give you. But I'm going to talk about Performance Line, Rivoli and Opera. This is an Opera, so this is the top of the range when it comes to the interior of the car. And it's just bloody lovely, I think. The issue I have with the Performance Line is the dashboard area here and down here. It does it in Alcantara. Now, I don't have a problem with Alcantara. I think it's a really nice material, but it's a nice material on a sports car or a hot hatch. On a kind of luxurious SUV, I don't really see the point of it personally. And I think it takes away a lot of what DS automobiles are trying to achieve, personally. With the look of the car, I think they're going for that, and I don't think they should pander to we need to offer something a bit sporty for those like it. Don't. Why just offer just luxury. You're French, do what you want. And I think you do this so well, because this feels absolutely beautiful in here. Way nice. I've got, at the moment on our drive, there's a £100,000 Audi SQ8 e-tron that I've been reviewing for Auto EV, and it doesn't feel as special inside as this car, and this car's half the price. So there you go. Right, so first of all, the design and the layout of it, love it, absolutely love the fact. I also love the fact that they're not using an awful lot of sort of like Citroen switchgear. So a lot of it is bespoke to DS. So like the metalized switches, which for the window switches, they're down on the console here, not on the door. So just watch that, that's there. Your drive mode select button, that is sort of similar to what you get on the other Stellantis group cars, but again, they've styled it differently for the DS, so that's there. The pistol grip transmission lever, some people don't like it, I quite like it, that's okay. You know, things like the steering wheel feels nice. This is the Opera, as I say, so this has got the Napa watch strap leather, which I do like. In the Rivoli, you get normal leather, a basalt black leather with a sort of like the diamond pattern quilting. Remember I was saying about the diamond thing? There's a few more kind of diamond stuff to talk about in here. The engine start button is up there. That fooled me. It takes a while. I was looking down here for it when I first got in the car the other day. It's up there. That's a kind of diamond finish. And then you've got the kind of diamond knurled controls, like the volume one here, and then this diamond turned metalized finish round here, which is lovely. Same on the steering wheel. You get kind of little knurled wheels there, and then this diamond behind here, which is the driver attention warning. I will discuss that in a second. Okay. Right, main focus point is this. It is the 12-inch infotainment system. So let me start the car up. That's the other thing, sorry, I meant to show this. You get this little BRM chronographs clock which kind of revolves around. Now, BRM chronographs are a French watch manufacturer. They're not everyone's cup of tea. I'm a big watch fan. They're not my cup of tea. They're big, chunky old kind of watches. But again, they're very much sports orientated. So it feels very different to sort of like what DS are trying to promote, which is to say they are trying to promote that kind of luxury side. So if it had been like a Cartier or something like that, that's what you would almost expect. But anyway, it's fine. I like the fact that it revolves round as well. That's quite cool. So, but yeah, just watch that. So it's just my bugbear. Notice the little Easter egg here. See, Moulin Rouge soundtrack, French. Hey, like what I do there? See, I think about these things. It's up there for thinking, down there for the dancing. Right, let's discuss this screen. So as I say, you've got a 12-inch infotainment screen. This is the one thing that it just takes a bit of understanding. And this was the area where Liz had a bit of a problem the other day. Excuse me. All she wanted to do was turn the radio on. And she said, how the heck do you turn the radio on? You know, where is it? That's the thing. You've really got to understand. You've got to spend a bit of time understanding where everything is in this screen. And that's the downside. You've got to figure it all out. So you've got some shortcut buttons here. So home, car settings is the other one here, which is this one here. And that brings this up. And then you can go through there's 3 different screen displays, you see. Massage function for the seats, passenger and driver. Heating functions, climate control, seat options if you want your heat. So the point is, there's 2 or 3 steps to go through before you maybe find something which you think should be quite easy to find, such as the heated seat. It's not a button. So if you go from, say, the home screen, let's get back to where the home screen was, here, and you want to put your heated seat on, you've got to go, where is it? Climate, seat options, there it is there. So that's 3 steps to put the heated seat on. See what I mean? Not the end of the world. Once you've kind of figured out where it all is, it becomes second nature. But my point is, there are just too many layers you've got to go through to do something quite simple such as that. And that's where this becomes really annoying. So the driver attention system that's here, if you drive with your hand like that, which you shouldn't do, but people do, it blocks its view of your face and it thinks you're not paying attention, so it starts to beep at you. If you move your eye from the dead ahead to here, to let's say switch your heated seat on, or to find the radio station you want, it does it as well because your eyes are off the road. Right, why put that on to chastise you for something that you've created, DS? by burying things in screens. That's my issue with it. So if you want us to keep our attention focused on the road, give us something we can easily use. Okay? And that's not just DS, that's any car manufacturer, because you're all at it. So stop chastising us for taking our eyes off the road by making us take our eyes off the road because you're putting everything on a screen. That's what I'm talking about. Right, you also get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is wireless standard, which is good. So that's excellent, so that's all there. However, beware, you now get a digital driver's display in here, which you can configure the middle of. So if you want your map, for instance, in the middle here, you can have. Now I quite like that. I quite like the fact you can have your navigation here and leave that for your infotainment system. However, if you use the navigation of Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, let's say Google Maps or Waze or Apple Maps, that's not duplicated on this screen. That is the generic inbuilt navigation system only. So you've got to have your Waze up here, or because what I tend to do is have navigation on, but I turn the sound, the notifications off, and I just follow the map. But as I say, it's not duplicated in here. So just be aware of that. It won't highlight that if you're using the maps from Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Okay, right. Shortcut buttons down here, heated front windscreen. It's got a heated windscreen, brilliant, love that. If you've never used a heated windscreen, they're a godsend in the winter, especially in the UK. Heated rear screen, climate off, home button, car settings and climate menu. The only downside is that when you switch the car off, when you can still use this display with the car's main ignition switched off, these de-illuminate. So the light goes off from behind these and you can't figure out which one's which. So there we go. The other silly thing that I don't particularly like, and again it's a little bit of a nitpicky thing, but it's worth mentioning. This is the volume here, this roller thing here for the radio, your tracks or whatever, yeah? But that's not it on the wheel. It's two separate buttons, up and down. So you immediately start doing that, thinking you're turning the volume down, and you're not. What you're doing is adjusting the display. That's a bit daft. Why is that not duplicated by that? Why is that duplicated by two separate buttons? Just seems a bit at odds. Anyway, that's it. That's the only thing that I can really complain about when it comes to that. The fact that too many things are buried in this screen, and the fact that it demands you take your eye off the road and then chastises you for doing it when you're going into the screen. Okay. Right, what else do we talk about? Right, one more problem that I've realised as well. This is nice. Look here, you've got this thing that's covered here with this beautiful lid that's trimmed in leather. When you press it, oh, nice, it's lovely damped action. That in there is your wireless charging pad for your mobile phone. However, my phone doesn't fit in that. I've got an iPhone 15 Pro Max thing, and it won't fit in there. It does in terms of that, but it won't lie flat, so therefore I can't charge the phone up. And I would think there'll be some like big Samsungs and stuff like their flip phones that won't fit in there either. So just be aware of that. There is two USB ports you can charge your phone up from there, but phones don't fit in that. If you go too big on your phone, they won't fit in that mat, so that's a bit silly. There's also a 12-volt socket down in there too. Drive mode button, I'll talk about that when we're driving it. Storage is excellent in some respects. You get the two cup holders here, which are great for your water bottle and your Yeti coffee mug, which I do like. Also, there's a massive big deep bin here. Look, I can get my arm in that. That's huge. That'll get a fair few Mars bars in there. And there's a little slot just behind the gear lever you can pop your wallet into, or your gate key or whatever. That's if you've got electric gates. That's good. Door bins are lovely as well, and I really love the fact they're lined in carpet. Thank you, DS. That's a bugbear of mine with car manufacturers like Audi and whatever that say they're all premium, and then they've got plastic door bins and your keys rattle around in them, your sunglasses do. DS, you've thought about it, you've lined it with carpet. Thank you. Your only downside is the glove box, because the fuse box takes up half of it. You'll only get one pair of gloves in it. That's it. What else can I talk about? The driving position. Well, that's superb. These seats are just epically comfortable. Beautifully cushioned. Massage function, heated and ventilated on the Opera as well. Manual adjustment of the steering column. Don't know if I'm 100% thinking on that. But then, as I say, that 100 grand Audi I've got at the moment, that's got a manual steering column, so I'm not going to criticise DS for it. Controls fall easy to hand. Your column stock's behind, as you'd expect. Cruise control on that third stock there. And then down here you've got some little auxiliary buttons for things like preconditioning, opening up the petrol cap, the heated front screen, tailgate release, and lane keep assist, which it does have. It's got a huge amount of advanced driver systems on it as well, so it's got them. Quality, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. That squidgy kind of rubber up here, then leather, the kind of stylized kind of diamond turned metal finish here is lovely. Tiny little bit of cheaper plastics on the lower console here, but I'm not even going to talk about that because it's not worth it, because the rest of the interior feels so special and they're so far down, and in fairness to them, they're well screwed together, so you know, things don't rattle and squeak and stuff like that. It feels substantial. The last thing to talk about, however, is the focal audio system which is on the car. So if you're into your music, you've got a focal audio system in it, and it's very, very good. So if you're into your music, you're well catered for here. So, what do we like and what don't we like? Well, we love the interior on the whole. The style of it, the design of it, how special it feels, the quality of the materials that it's made of, that we all love. The only downside is to say, that's a wee bit tricky. You've got to get used to this. You've got to be able to sort of like know your way around this just to do some simple stuff in it. And as I say, the problem then becomes is by using it, then you get this driver assistance. You can turn it off, but it will always default on whenever time you switch the car on, because that's the law now. You've got to have those things. So you can go in there, but also as well the fact that so many things are buried in different layers. So that maybe needs a little bit of tweaking from that point of view. But in terms of how special the interior feels, how comfortable the interior is, unquestionably one of the best out there. I'd rather sit in here than in that, as I say, £100,000 Audi that's on my drive at the moment. That's how good I think the interior is of the DS. So well done, guys. But as I say, avoid the Performance Line Plus with the Alcantara, because that's not what DS is about. It should be about luxury, not sportiness. So avoid that and you'll love this. Right, let's talk about engines. Basically there are two, one diesel, one petrol unit, the actual unit itself. But the petrol comes in three different varieties because they're all plug-in hybrids, but I'll go on to that in a second. The diesel is a 1.5 turbo diesel HDI unit, putting out 130 brake horsepower. Not exactly blazing stuff, is it? The only reason I would suggest you might want to look at the diesel is if you're a caravanist, because that's the only one that will tow a braked trailer in weight of over 1,400 kilos. The petrol ones are much less than that, so do be aware of that. All the cars are mated to an 8-speed automatic electronically controlled transmission, so you can't have a manual option in the car. It's 8-speed auto or nothing, irrespective of what engine option you go for. So that's the diesel, 130 brake horsepower, but it is the one to have if you tow. If you move into the petrol engines, which is personally the ones I would think are probably the better option with the car, and certainly the ones that sort of DS are promoting a little bit more, then the lead-in one is this one, the 225 model. So it's a 1.6 turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine that's teamed up with a battery and electric motor. Front wheel drive in this particular one, and as I say, it puts out around about 225 brake horsepower. That's enough to see the car scrapper from 0 to 60 in just under 9 seconds and around about 140 miles an hour as a top speed. To me, that's plenty enough for this car, and actually the 1.6 petrol engine, I think, is probably the pick of the range to have rather than the diesel, as I say, unless you need that towing capability. If you do need to tow, and this is the one that you go for, the 225, then your ability to tow a brake trailer drops to around about 1,275 kilos, so do bear that in mind. And if you move up to the next one, the 300, the E-Tense 300, that adds on a rear electric motor onto the car, so 4-wheel drive, 300 brake horsepower there or thereabouts, but your ability to tow drops below 1,200 kilos brake trailer. And the top of the line 360, the E-Tense 360, which is sort of the performance model one if you like, that you can't even discuss the towing ability of that. It's around about 70 kilos, so don't even think about towing with that particular car. But I think, as I say, those two, the 300 and the 360, have 4-wheel drive because they've got a rear electric motor, and the performance of those is quite much quicker than obviously you get the 225. It drops the 0 to 60 time down to under 6 seconds for both of them. But personally speaking, I don't really see the need for that. Now, in terms of economy, the official figures that DS say from the diesel that you should get is round about 53 miles to the gallon on the average, on the combined cycle. When you look at the figures, the official figures for this 225, because it's obviously got the electric power and a battery in it, they say the official MPG is 225 miles to the gallon. just ignore all of that. That's just guff as far as I'm concerned. I've been getting round about the same as the diesel out of this car, so round about early 50s when you're not sort of like hooning it about. And again, that's another reason why I think personally that the 225 is the pick of the range. Now your petrol plug-in hybrids also have a 14.2 kilowatt hour battery in the car. Now that's its gross capacity. The usable capacity is 12.9 kilowatt hours, and that should see an electric only range of roughly 40 odd miles depending on the model. So the more powerful ones I think just drop below the 40. This 225 I think they say it suggests it's going to do 41, 42 miles of electric only range. The reality is it's probably not going to be that, but it might just be enough for like your local commute for a week, you know, driving up and down to the local railway station for instance, or just that little last bit into town where you can run an electric only. And I'll talk about the modes when we're in the car and driving that. You can charge the car up from a domestic 3-pin socket, and if you do that, it's going to take roughly about 6 and a bit hours to do that. But please make sure you've got your socket checked by an electrician before you start plugging electric cars into them, please. And I'd also recommend you don't use an extension cable with that. If you do have a 7 kilowatt wall box, however, you can charge it from that. There's no CCS on plug-in hybrids, so you can't use the more ultra rapid things, you know, of charging speeds up to 100 odd kilowatt hours. But if you're using a 7 kilowatt wall box, then you can charge it up from flat to full in just over 2 hours. Right, now, as I say, there are different, obviously, powertrain options that are available to you with the DS7. It starts with the 1.5 HDI diesel engine car and the Performance Line Plus, but this is, I think, could be pick of the range. This is the 225. Which is a front-wheel drive car only, so it's not dual motor, it's not the four-wheel drive. To get the four-wheel drive ones, you've got to go up to the 300 E10s or the E10s 360. And they're a lot more money and a lot heavier, and obviously they've got motors on the rear axles, whereas this is the one I think that could be the sweet spot of the range. 225 horsepower, as its name suggests. It does 0 to 16 just under 9 seconds, I think it's 8.8 seconds, which I think is about right for this size of car, and I don't think you need much more than that. Obviously, if you do want more, you can have it, but as I say, you've got to spend a lot more money and go for one of the other two. The way the car drives, first of all, has to be commended, because as I say, we've gone for the, or DS have gone for the kind of luxury side of things, in a way. As I say, the performance is good, the performance is exactly as you expect it to be. The refinement is also very, very good. There's acoustic glass on the car, which is something you don't get with the Audi SQ8 e-tron, which is £100,000. That's another car I've been driving this week for Auto EV. And this car knocks that into a cocked hat in terms of its refinement. Now, interestingly enough, my partner Liz, as I say, has been driving this car. And I posed her the question the other day, would you drive this car to Scotland if we had to go up and see my mum? She says, yeah, well, I would, but it depends how many times you need to stop and charge it. And I says, what do you mean? She thought this was a pure EV. She thought this was an electric car. So quiet it is in terms of the engine. Now, it's a 1.6 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine that's up at the front here. And yes, you can hear it when you absolutely put your foot down or you're going to kick down or stuff. But generally, in day-to-day running, it's very quiet. You just generally don't even hear the engine running. Now, it's obviously teamed up with the battery and the electric motor, and you can have it set through various different guises, settings, drive modes, whatever you want to call it, depending obviously on what you want. So the car, if it has enough charge, will always set off in electric mode, so it's very quiet as you pull away. And then as you sort of like engage more power through the accelerator, or more, you know, you're trying to move out, it will engage the engine in that sense. You can use this drive mode button down here, excuse me while I squeeze past this cyclist. You can use this drive mode button down here to choose the one that you want. So you can have sport mode, where everything kind of tightens up, the steering takes on a bit more weight, there's a little bit more sort of like a little bit more throttle response, immediate throttle response from it as well. And I'm not sure that I really like delving into that sport mode quite as much, if I'm fair, because as I say, I don't think sportiness is what the DS7 does well, and I'll get onto that in just a second. From there, we can also go down to comfort, which is the one that I've been mostly driving around in. you can go into hybrid or electric. And obviously, that is what it is. You know, it's exactly what it says. So hybrid, it'll just decide itself what it's going to do, and electric is on pure electric mode. Now, as I said earlier, with the size of this battery, DS say that you should get round about sort of like 40 miles of electric driving alone. Now, again, relating back to Liz, you know, for where we live, she drives up to the local railway station if she's working from her London office. It's only a couple of miles away. You should never even maybe see the engine kick in over 2 and odd weeks, or even just, as I say, your kind of general running around that you do normally, you might never actually hear the engine cut in at all. See, here I am at the moment. I've got no battery left in it, no power in the battery, so it is running on the engine, and I'm doing 50 miles an hour, and you genuinely can't hear the engine. I genuinely can't hear it running, and there's no ref counter to tell me that it is. This is a really quiet car. This is nice. If there is an element that is noisy, it's the tyres. There's a little bit of, and again, not uncomfortably so, it's just general, you can hear the tyres on the road. So if they were to sort of like add a little bit more sound deadening round about maybe the wheel arches, it's pretty much silent. If you get it on a really nice smooth piece of tarmac, then you just don't hear anything at all. There's no wind noise, there's very little, well, as I say, there's no engine noise that you can hear, and there's very little road noise comes up. But if there is a fly in this particular French ointment, it's the ride quality. And that's the bit that really surprises me, because that's the bit that they should have, dare I suggest they should have done. They should have concentrated a lot more on. Now, DS, when it moved away from Citroen, you know, as I say, they've moved away. They're not using any kind of switch gear from Citroen or anything like that. But the one thing that they should have sort of like said, can we use that please, is the hydraulic cushion system that's fitted to the C4. Because that would transform this car. It would make a good car a great car. Because this is the flaw with this DS7, and that is this: instead of using some fancy suspension, what they do is they use a camera system up here. This is based on what Mercedes used to do, and Mercedes brought it a few years ago, and it scans the road ahead and it adjusts the suspension on what it can see. Now that's fine when it can see bumps in the road, undulations and things like that, because then obviously it sets the suspension up for that. What it can't see, however, is things like dropped manhole covers, drain holes, potholes. It doesn't seem to be able to pick them up. So you've got a real mixture from this suspension system, where on one hand it feels soft and floaty, and then on the other hand, all of a sudden it's thrown a bit of a curveball by this dropped manhole cover, and it drops into it, and it's quite harsh. So it feels really unsettled, the ride. See? Just there, it didn't see that. Obviously, it didn't pick up that sort of like ridge on the road, where obviously you know, there had been some sort of like tarmac taken out of it, and it just kind of crashed through it. And it makes me think that if they'd just gone down the route of what Citroen had done with those hydraulic cushions, if they just borrowed that, it would absolutely knock spots off the competition, this car, especially in terms of its comfort. Now, those hydraulic cushions, how they work, let me just briefly get, going through a width restriction, let me briefly get very boring on you. But basically what it is, it's not like the old hydropneumatic system that Citroen used to use with LHM fluid. It basically has, when you have a spring and damper system, and then at the top of the bump stops, you have these hydraulic cushions that then have a bit of movement in them. So in other words, when you hit, let's say, a sleeping policeman or a speed bump, and the wheel goes into a full compression, so in other words, the spring and the damper are compressed to the point it can't travel anymore, that is when you feel that thump, because that is the energy coming through the structure of the car. That's what you feel as a driver or a passenger. What the hydraulic cushions do is they then allow an element of movement. So in other words, when they hit that bump stop, there's still a movement to go. So the energy is then dissipated through that. And it's the same on a decompression, so the wheel drops into a pothole, and as it hits the end of its travel, instead of just going bang, it then has a further amount of travel through these hydraulic cushions. And what you end up with is a very comfortable, fluid suspension system that still utilises standard kind of spring and dampers rather than the hydrogen pneumatics Citroen of old. Citroen have got something like 20 odd patents on this system, and this car needs that without shadow of a doubt. It really does, because it really would make a world of difference to this vehicle. It's the one bit of this car that leaves me disappointed. The smoothness of the drivetrain, this 8-speed auto box is lovely. It just slips itself through the ratios. There's no step in them at all. It's beautifully smooth. It's refined, it's quiet, it's all the rest of it. The performance, I think, is enough. But that ride quality, it's not uncomfortable, it's just disappointing. I just wish they'd, if they'd just got that right, this car would be absolutely something else. I could sit here and say, don't bother going looking at a BMW or an Audi or a Mercedes, just buy the DS7 because it is perfect. But it's not. And that's the issue with it. When it comes to the handling, that is also the issue with the car as well, because if you do get a little bit, I don't know, sporty and feeling, and you want to start throwing the car around a little bit, as you go into bends and you push on, it stiffens the suspension up, so you then get a little bit of understeer, which then sort of like leads to, so the body control is very flat, so you don't feel the lean into the corner. But what you then get is that the grip loses out at the front and it just washes itself a little bit wide. So as I say, if you try to be sporty with it, it just doesn't really work. But yet they seem to have tried it with a sporty ride. And that's where I feel they've gone wrong. That's where I feel they've tried to be, rather than just being really brave about it and going, we're all about luxury, we're all about comfort, we're not about sportiness. They've added in a little bit of sport, or tried to add in a little bit of sportiness, and it hasn't worked, and it's actually ruined what could be a brilliant car. Right, let me just talk about another couple of things as well, because as I say, I'm not being negative about the car, because I love this car, it's lovely, but you just see there, over those harsh ridges, it's just not coping with them as well as it should. Oh, so frustrating. Anyway, the brakes. Brakes are okay. I quite like the brakes. There's a relative, there's nothing behind me. Yeah, there's a nice progressive feel through the throttle. Through the brake pedal. Sorry. There's a nice progressive feel through the brake pedal, which is not something that I've been able to say about Stellantis electric cars. They've got a deadness at the top of the pedal where it transitions from the motor, the regen of the motor, into the actual physical braking system. Now you do have a brake regen mode on this transmission. So when it's in drive, if I bring it back now to B and I lift off the pedal, it has a regen system where it's going to put charge back into the battery by inverting the motor at the electric drivetrain. It's not one pedal driving, so you can't just drive on the accelerator like a lot of EV drivers like. You can't do that. But it does bring the car up enough. For instance, if you're just driving slowly and you're coming up to a roundabout, for instance, you don't need to use the brakes that much. You just come off the accelerator and it slows the car down just enough, just to give you enough braking to go round the roundabout. That's really nice. So that's there, that's available to you as well. So that's good. As I say, the steering, I have no issue with the steering whatsoever. It's communicative enough when you're in the standard kind of comfort mode. When you're in sport mode, yes, it does stiffen up a little bit, but it responds well. And as I say, whilst I'm not going to sit here and say it is an Alpine A110 or a Lotus Elise or a Porsche Cayman, for this style of car, I think the steering on it is very good. The driving position's excellent. The visibility around the car is really very good. As I say, the only thing is that screen, when you take your eyes off the road too much to start using the screen, it starts to tell you there that you're being a bit naughty. But if you want to do that, don't put as much stuff in that screen. So to summarise, it's smooth, it's quiet, it's got a great drivetrain, It's got comfortable seats, it's got a brilliant driving position, the seats are superb, there's enough performance out of the 1.6 litre engine car with the 225 horsepower, but the ride quality, it just falls down there for me. It could have been so much better, this car. And as I say, I've got to really emphasise this. It is not an uncomfortable car. Far from it. It is not as uncomfortable as, say, my BMW iX2, which is actually quite harsh over a lot of bumps. It's just that it can't quite make its mind up what it wants to do. As I say, you get these long undulations on sort of like open roads like this that the camera picks up and adjusts the suspension accordingly. But it's those little bits that it just misses out on. It's almost like it needs to clean its glasses, because all of a sudden there'll be a dropped manhole cover, it'll just bang through, and it just feels at odds with what the rest of the suspension's doing. And it's a real shame, because as I say, it stops a good car from being a great car. Now, forgive the iPad, but I want to talk about pricing, so I want to make sure I get these accurate. So I've got them listed here. And also, please bear in mind that these prices are correct at time of filming, which is June 2024. So if you are watching this at a later date, just bear in mind these were correct when I did film this. Right, basically, there are 3 trim levels. As I say, there has been more throughout the car's life, but as it stands at the moment, there are 3 trim levels. You start with the Performance Line Plus model. Now, the one benefit with the Performance Line Plus is it's the only one where you can have all 4 sort of like power plant options with. So it starts with a 1.5 turbo diesel engine, that one I was telling you about, and that comes in at just over £39,000. You then move up through this 225 front wheel drive car, or the E-Tense 300, which is the all-wheel drive model, or then the E-Tense 360, which is the range topping one. That gets the driveline out of the Peugeot 508 PSE, the Peugeot Sport Engineered car that I road tested a few months back. So if you're interested in that car, go and have a look at it there, but that's got that drivetrain in it. If you're sticking with the Performance Line Plus and you're going for that E-Tense 360, then it tops out at just round about the £55,000 bracket, okay? Now, the Rivoli, which is the mid-spec model, you can't have that with that E-Tense 360, so you either get the Rivoli with the diesel, the 225 or the 300, that's it. And then there's the Opera, the trim level, which this particular car is, and this is the one that you can't have with the diesel engine. So you either have it as this, the 225 front wheel drive car, or the E-Tense 300 4x4, or the E-Tense 360 4x4. And if you go for that car, which is the top of the tree, then you're just, as little as makes no difference, £60,000, which is a lot of money in fairness, you know. Personally, I think this could be the pick of the range, this 225 model, because I think it's quick enough and I like it in the Opera trim level. And as I say, it's a little bit more of kind of what DS is about, that kind of luxurious kind of brand. And if you go for this particular car, this particular test car is listed at, he says, £50,540. So not cheap, but it is less than some of its more ubiquitous German rivals. And talking of competition, what else could you be looking at if you're looking at a DS7? Well, if you think back to the beginning of the review, I mentioned cars such as the BMW X3, the Audi Q5 and the Mercedes-Benz GLC. And the reason for that is the DS7 is a little bit of an odd car, because in terms of its size, it's roughly the size of those 3 cars, but it's actually priced to compete with the cars below those ones. So in other words, the BMW X1, the Audi Q3 and the Mercedes-Benz GLA. So in terms of its price, it's more in competition with those cars, but you're getting a slightly bigger car for that money. So that is worthwhile bearing in mind. But we could be here all day when we start talking about, you know, particular rivals for this car, but it's worthwhile just mentioning a few more. The other one, if you're going for something like the DS, which as I say is that kind of not the most kind of ubiquitous one that you would immediately think of, maybe something like the Lexus NX, because that's also available with a hybridized drivetrain as well. We know how good Lexus are at their hybrids, so that's a car that you could consider. The UX, which is the sort of like the car below the NX, is a bit more, it's much smaller than this in terms of its rear accommodation, so it's probably not that car, so it's more like the NX. You could also consider maybe something like the Jaguar E-Pace. Now, Jaguar is a brand of going all electric from 2025, but again, they are available with hybridized drivetrains. They're still a prestigious brand, Jaguar, so that's possibly a consideration that you're going to have to think about as well. From Volvo, then of course there's the XC40, the brilliant little XC40, and that's available again with hybrid drivetrains or fully electric as well. But if you think about the Stellantis group that DS is part of, there's a lot of in-house competition that comes from within there. Peugeot, the new 3008. Now, whilst they're promoting the E3008, the fully electric version, there is going to be a hybrid version of that car as well. So that's going to be something you should maybe consider if you're looking at this car. And Peugeot have got that whole new style thing going on. I have to say, having seen that car, it is a stunning looking car. There's also Alfa Romeo. So perhaps you're maybe going to think of the Alfa Romeo Tonale. Certainly not called the Toenail. That would be silly to call a car a toenail. It's pronounced Tonale. But that could also be considered as a rival for this car. And you may also want to consider something like a Range Rover Evoque, because again, from a prestigious manufacturer, Land Rover, Range Rover, hybrid drivetrains, a little bit smaller than this car, but certainly you've got the prestige there of having a Range Rover. So that should be considered too. Some cars are real hidden gems. Now those are cars that I think are cruelly overlooked. They're better than, dare I suggest, the more obvious choices that are out there that people tend to go and buy instead of them. The Peugeot 508 PSE is a great example of that. Most people will go and buy an Audi S4. I think the Peugeot personally is a better car. I think it's a really good car. And that's what I mean by a real hidden gem. The DS7 isn't that. Now, nor is it quirky, however, because quirky is just a polite way of saying something's a bit weird. You know, when your daughter turns up and introduces you to her new boyfriend who turns out to be a goth, that's when you turn around and politely say, oh, he's a bit quirky, whereas in reality what you're saying is, he's weird and I don't really approve. That's not this car. However, the one area that DS could have made this better, and dare I suggest should have made it better, the ride quality department, is what stops this car being from merely a good car to being a really great car. However, what I will say is this: if you are tired of turning up on the school run every morning and seeing seas of BMWs, Audis and Mercedes, you do have a very credible and very worthy alternative that's there, and that is this new DS7. I love the fact that it's as beautifully French, sort of like on the inside. I love the kind of luxury that they give with the car. The drivetrain, I think, is really, really good on the car as well. But as I say, it's just that ride quality that stops a good car from being a great car. But it does show that France are once again producing a vehicle that's worthy of a very luxurious and very premium badge that can compete with what Germany can offer. Thank you for watching another episode from House of Cars, a new car review this week of the DS7 E-Tench 225. As always, please make sure you are subscribed to the House of Cars channel, because I say we are new and we do need as much support as we possibly can, even from the people in that plane that's flying above me now and disturbing my possibly fifth take on recording this. Never mind. If you have enjoyed it, then make sure that you give it a like as well, a little thumbs up too. And if you press the bell button down below, that means you get notified of when my next video is up and is live. Now, I know I've been a little bit sporadic when it comes to videos. I apologise, I have been very busy, but there's a lot of stuff planned for House of Cars. So please, please, please do make sure that you do activate that notification bell button. If you're into classics, if you're into new cars, if you're into road trips, stuff like that, we've got a lot of stuff coming up that I think you're going to really, really enjoy. Now, if you're into electric cars, not hybrids, but full electric cars, then you can also see me on Auto EV, which is my fully electric car channel as well. So please make sure you subscribe to that one if it's electric cars that you're interested in. Leave me your thoughts in your comment section down below as well. Is there something you disagree with what I've said? If you've got a DS7, do you want to let me know how your life has been with the car, then please use the comment section to sort of like let me know how you're getting on, and see maybe we can get a little community going with people over the cars review. And is there a car you want me to maybe have a look at, a review of a car that you think is worthy of us? We tend to stick to the less obvious choices on House of Cars, so please by all means do let me know if there's something down there that you'd like to see on the channel, and I'll do my very, very best to be there. We're also on Instagram, so House of Cars 1973. No guesses, no prize for guessing why it's got 1973 at the end of it, but we're there, so if you want to give me a follow there as well, I'd really appreciate that too. All it means for me to say is thank you once again. Thank you for everyone who's commented already on some of the videos. As I say, I'm sorry it's taken so long to get another one out, but trust me, We're going to be thick and fast coming through from now on. Hope you've enjoyed this review. Thanks for sticking with me. I'll see you again soon.